Yeah, good morning, folks. Welcome back to Three's End here on this Sunday morning. This morning, I'm going to share some experiences I had with Lieutenant Colonel John McMurtry in the 25th Flying Training Squadron in 1976, 77, and so forth. Colonel Mac, as he was fondly known to us, was one of those crusty lieutenant colonels that I mentioned in an earlier video. Each squadron seemed to have one or perhaps two of these guys. And these guys were the salt of the earth. They really knew how the cow eats the cabbage. And they weren't afraid to tell you about it. I had a couple experiences myself with Colonel Mac in that vein. He did not believe in Theory X or Theory Y school of management. His was very simple. If I heard it once, I heard him say it 100 times. I'm going down there and blow their shit away. That was his way of getting the troops in line. And he took the occasion to blow mine away a couple times too. And first story I have here is I think probably the first time I encountered his theory of management in the person, in the flesh. We were night flying. I was the flight commander, and as such, I had the responsibility for the night briefing. Now, typically, in 1976, in those days, we would night fly on 2 consecutive nights. The first night was dual, and the second night we'd solo the students out. So we all meet in this room, and night flying was a critical event. There are a lot of things that could go wrong. So we would have this briefing, and in the briefing, we had several people to come in and monitor the briefing to make sure we covered all the bases. My God, I had as many monitors that night, or so it seemed, as I did students and instructors. I had monitors from Stand-eval, standardization, monitors from check section, a monitor from section commander, and of course the ops officer, Colonel Mac. And they're all in the back sitting there making sure I covered all the bases. Well, keep in mind, I had just come from an operational squadron in rescue C-130s. I'd been out of pilot training for a couple of years, 4 or 5 years, had flown C-141s and C-130s, and I guess I overlooked what the big deal was. Night flying was pretty well spelled out in our manuals and regulations, told how to do things. So I expected my students to read the book, and I expected my instructor pilots to know what their responsibilities were. And so that first night, the briefing went accordingly. Now, in my checkout as a new IP advance, I had to attend all aspects of pilot training, one of them being a night briefing. And I can't remember now what flight I sat in on, but damn, that thing went on forever. It went on for about 45 minutes. I thought, good God, I could fly the whole mission in the time they have this night briefing. And with my ADD, ADHD, and WD-40, I never had the patience for briefings. I just never did. So that night I walked in, went over the weather, went over the runway that we were going to use, the ops notes, which we called church notes, and so forth. Then I started in on the night briefing. And I said, okay, with respect to this, you'll find this in Air Force Manual 5138. And this one's in the regulation. This is here, and so forth. Be sure to review that before we go. First launch is in about 45 minutes or whatever it was. I said, does anyone have any questions? I should have known there was going to be some questions because there were about 7 guys standing in the back of the room with their mouths all wide open, like so forth. I didn't pay any attention to it. I noticed it, but okay, fine. So we ended the briefing, and I walked back to my office. My God, I had a line going out the door of people that wanted to offer me tips on giving the briefing. That briefing lasted, I don't know if I mentioned it, between 9 and 12 minutes, whatever it was. I don't know. So these guys are all lined up. The first one's Colonel Mac, and he came in and he blew my shit away. He went on and on about how we're dealing with student pilots, not real pilots, and so forth. He was right. He was right. I cut the damn thing too short. So anyway, after him was Chief of Stand-of-Val or Stand-of-Val officer, and then Chief of Check Section, and so forth down. I got the word. The next night, when we were having the second night of night flying, I briefed that sucker for about 50 minutes. I mean, I covered every aspect I could think of as far as night flying goes. And nary a one stopped by the office to offer any suggestions. I mean, I covered it ad nauseum. So that was one of my first experiences with Colonel Mac. Unfortunately, with certain individuals, that first impression is paramount. And that was the first time he had heard me give a briefing. And I'll tell you, I wore that for the rest of my tenure there at Vance. That and a couple other things. I know what it was. I've always liked plants. Just like having house plants around. So I brought in a house plant, set it on my desk, and it wasn't long before my IPs picked up on it, and each one of them brought a little house plant, set it around their desk. So in this flight room, we had a bunch of house plants sitting around on each IP's desk. It was kind of novel, I suppose, until Colonel Mac walked in and saw it. Holy crap. He informed me it was a pilot training base, not a botanical garden, to get rid of the shrubbery. Okay, fine. So I did. One other time that comes to mind with Colonel Mac, I came out of my flight room one day, and I saw John Litton, one of my, he had been an IP who worked for me, and then he got a flight of his own. He was the flight commander of L Flight. And I saw him walking down the hallway, and his shoulders were slumped, and his head was down, and kind of just loping along. And I said, "Hey, John," I said, "what you up to?" He said, "Going down to Colonel Mac's office to get my shit blown away." I knew what he meant, but God bless him. Colonel Mac was another one of those gems that you couldn't help but become a better officer if you listened to him. And I listened to him. I tried to emulate him and a couple others along the way in my later career. We once had this fly-in where we hosted about 200 airplanes at Vance Air Force Base. And they flew in from all directions. They came in to see what our operation was and just enjoy a Saturday afternoon of flying and hot dogs and hamburgers, and a couple safety briefings, which was the real purpose, was to educate local flyers in Oklahoma what our operation was all about. After the event was over, one of these airplanes was taxiing out, and the nose wheel went in a gopher hole, and it dinged the prop a little bit. Oh, crap. So we're standing there looking at this airplane with the ding in the prop. Colonel Mac comes out with 2 beers, gives one to the pilot. He takes one. They take a hammer and bang the prop out, straighten it up, and Colonel Mac shakes hands with him. He's on his way. I suppose the statute of limitations is over. I could share that story now. If not, I will never reveal who the pilot was. 2 reasons. I wouldn't tell on him. And second of all, can't remember. That's one of the nice things about growing old, is some of these things you can forget. At any rate, in later years, Colonel Mac moved down to San Antonio, and he lived not far from where my folks live. So when I'd go down to visit my folks, I'd slide over and visit Colonel Mac, and he still would ding me about the shrubbery in my flight room and a couple other things. But God bless him. You couldn't help but admire him, and maybe one of those days become a crusty old lieutenant colonel myself. So good to see everybody today. Hope you're having a great day, and we'll be back with you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.